12 ancient discoveries that stunned even top scientists. You won't believe number 7. Hello, and welcome to the Ancient History Channel. My friend, did you know that there are stories from the past that were never written in books, but instead buried deep beneath the earth, waiting for the right person at the right moment to bring them to light? What's even more fascinating is that when these discoveries are finally uncovered, science doesn't always have immediate answers. In fact, some findings have left even top researchers completely stunned, as everything they once believed suddenly no longer seems to fit. So in this video, let's explore 12 ancient mysteries that have shocked the world. Each discovery is like a strange puzzle piece. Some appear to come from the future, yet are millions of years old, while others reveal bizarre rituals so unbelievable it's hard to imagine humans ever performed them. What makes it even more intriguing is that the deeper we dive into these mysteries, the more fragile the line between science and the unexplained becomes. Some theories may sound perfectly reasonable, until a single small detail emerges and shatters everything, forcing scientists to go back and rethink it all from the beginning. So, are you ready to explore with me? If you are, let's dive into the very first discovery right now. 8 frozen Inuit family mummies preserved for over 500 years. My friends, there are stories that, when told, don't just spark curiosity, they send chills down your spine. One powerful example comes from a land so cold that even time itself seems to be frozen in place. The desolate, ice-covered wilderness of Greenland, where the wind howls endlessly and the cold can cut through even the thickest layers of clothing. It was in this seemingly lifeless place that researchers uncovered a discovery that stunned the world. A secret hidden beneath layers of ice for centuries. It was the remains of an Inuit family, preserved almost perfectly for over 500 years in the frozen ground. This family consisted of 8 individuals, 6 adult women, 1 child, and an infant just 6 months old. They are believed to have died around the year 1475. But what left scientists truly astonished was the remarkable condition of their bodies. Their skin had not fully decomposed, their hair was still intact, and even their fingernails remained nearly perfectly preserved. Just imagine, more than half a millennium has passed, and yet they still lie there, as if they had only just fallen into a deep sleep. Doesn't that give you chills? So what caused such an extraordinary phenomenon? According to experts, the answer lies in Greenland's harsh climate, which essentially acted as a perfect natural freezer. Extremely low temperatures combined with a dry environment prevented decomposition, allowing the bodies to remain almost unchanged for centuries. But if that were the whole story, this discovery wouldn't be considered one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in North America. The most controversial detail centers around the 6-month-old infant among the mummies. One shocking theory suggests that the baby may have been buried alive. It's a disturbing idea and understandably difficult to accept. However, in ancient Inuit culture, this may have been part of their beliefs. When a mother passed away, her very young child might be buried with her, so that they could remain together in the afterlife. A deeply spiritual belief, yet one that still sends a chill down our spines today. These mummies were discovered in 1972 at Kilakitsak, an area once inhabited by the Inuit people. Since then, the discovery has remained one of the most remarkable archaeological finds ever recorded. But what truly makes this story extraordinary isn't just the incredible state of preservation, it's what the mummies reveal. Every small detail on their bodies, every layer of clothing, every burial position acts like a puzzle piece, helping researchers reconstruct the lives, customs, and even the tragic events this family experienced hundreds of years ago. And even today, that journey of discovery is far from over. Scientists continue to study, analyze, and develop new theories, hoping that one day they will fully uncover the truth behind the lives and deaths of this ancient hunting family. So what do you think? What really happened to them in the year 1475? Was it a sudden accident or the result of ancient customs we still don't fully understand? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because your perspective might just offer a completely new way of explaining this 500-year-old mystery. Mass grave of 54. Headless Viking warriors reveals a shocking truth about a legendary people. On the side of a gnarled, unremarkable road in Dorset, England, a place that, if you passed by, you'd probably think held nothing but dirt, stones, and the slow passage of time. But what you might not realize is that this seemingly ordinary spot became the site of a discovery that archaeologists simply couldn't ignore. At first, they expected to find nothing more than a few pebbles or remnants of old farming tools, perhaps something like a worn-out plow blade, when they began excavating the area. But the deeper they dug, the more unexpected the findings became, until they uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of 54 Viking warriors. And the most disturbing part? Every single one of them was missing their head. Just hearing that alone already feels unsettling, doesn't it? But the story doesn't end there. Rather than dismissing the site as a place to avoid, perhaps the aftermath of an ancient hunt or a long-forgotten violent clash, the archaeologists chose to proceed with extreme care. They documented the position of every bone, every smallest detail, as if they were trying to piece together a shattered puzzle from centuries ago. And it was during this meticulous process that something strange began to emerge. The skeletons were not scattered chaotically, as you might expect after a battle. Instead, they had been deliberately arranged. The leg bones were placed in one area, the arm bones gathered in another, the torso separated, and the skulls, the very parts that should have remained attached, were placed in a completely different location. Looking at this arrangement, does it seem random to you, or does it suggest something carefully planned? At first, archaeologists proposed a fairly logical explanation. They believed these Viking warriors may have attacked a local settlement but were ultimately defeated. The surviving villagers, driven by panic and anger, captured and executed them. Afterwards, they dismembered their enemies, perhaps even taking some of the heads as trophies or symbols of victory. It sounds reasonable, almost grounded in reality, right? But as they examined the cut marks on the neck bones more closely, that theory began to fall apart. These were not typical execution wounds. Instead of being struck from behind the neck, a quick and common method, the blows appeared to have been delivered from the front with near-perfect precision. This suggests that the victims may have been facing their executioners, or perhaps even accepting their fate willingly. At this point, the story takes a far darker turn. Archaeologists were forced to reconsider everything. They no longer believed this was simply an act of violent revenge. Instead, a more chilling theory emerged. These Viking warriors may have been part of a ritual sacrifice, an organized ritual with clear rules, carried out with an almost unsettling level of precision. What makes the mystery even more puzzling is that this type of ritual doesn't match any known customs from that time. The Vikings were famous for their conquests and their beliefs in gods like Odin and Thor. They were no strangers to war or death, but a systematic, ritualistic mass beheading like this, that's something entirely different. And the deeper researchers dig, the more the mystery thickens. There is no clear evidence of a major battle in the surrounding area, nor any definitive proof that this was an execution site for prisoners. All that remains are silent skeletons, lying there across the centuries, guarding a secret that history has yet to fully uncover. The oldest stone tomb in Sweden and the mystery of the missing skulls. A tomb over 5,500 years old, containing not only ancient human remains, but also unanswered questions about eerie rituals, unusual burial practices, and traces of an early agricultural civilization in the heart of Northern Europe. Would you believe such a place truly exists? Yes, it does, and it's located not far away in Sweden, one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Specifically, in central Sweden, archaeologists uncovered a stone burial chamber dating back to the Neolithic period, one of the oldest stone tombs ever discovered in Sweden and possibly in all of Scandinavia. Inside this tomb, scientists found the remains of at least 12 individuals, including both infants and elderly people. This suggests it was not a single burial, but rather a collective tomb used across multiple generations. However, what shocked researchers was not just its ancient age, but the mysterious absence of certain bones. Carl Goran Sjögren, an archaeologist at the University of Gothenburg and the lead author of the study, explained that many skulls and long bones, such as femurs and upper arm bones, were missing. Meanwhile, smaller bones like those from the hands, feet, ribs, and even teeth were still present. What makes this even more puzzling is that the tomb has remained intact since the Stone Age, with no signs of disturbance from grave robbers or natural disasters. This suggests that the larger bones may have been intentionally removed either at the time of burial or shortly afterward. So what really happened? Could it be that ancient people deliberately took the most important bones of the deceased for a specific purpose? Researchers are currently leaning toward the theory that this was part of an ancient burial ritual, where skulls and major bones held special symbolic meaning. These bones may have been preserved separately, reused in spiritual ceremonies, or even treated as sacred relics. Headless emphasized that what they discovered is very different from typical stone tombs, opening up a fascinating new direction for studying the beliefs and burial customs of Neolithic communities. Although no signs of violence or trauma have been found on the bones, scientists are continuing DNA analysis to determine whether those buried were members of the same family and whether any genetic conditions might help explain these unusual practices. Beyond that, chemical analysis of the bones has revealed a rare glimpse into their daily lives. These people lived in an early agricultural society. They cultivated crops, raised livestock, and consumed dairy products. All of this points to a significant shift towards settled living and food production in prehistoric times. So what do you think? Do you believe the missing bones were used in ritual sacrifices? Or could this simply be the result of time and cultural practices we don't yet fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's explore this mystery together. 300-million-year-old screw fossil. Evidence of extraterrestrial life? When you hear the phrase fossilized screw, you probably think of machinery or something from the modern world. But imagine this. What if one day you held a screw in your hand, and it turned out to be 300 million years old? What would you think it is? A strange trick of nature, or evidence of a civilization that existed long before humans? If that's hard to picture, let's travel back in time to 1990. In the Kaluga region of Russia, during a geological survey, scientists discovered a small fossil, about 0.8 inches long, but its appearance left everyone stunned. It looked exactly like a screw, complete with evenly spaced spiral threads running along its body. A structure that, honestly, doesn't seem like something nature would create. This discovery immediately sparked widespread attention, not only among scientists, but also among those fascinated by mysteries. Many theories began to emerge, and one of the most outrageous, yet incredibly captivating, was this. The object could be a lost artifact from extraterrestrials. This idea gained even more traction when people recalled that the Kaluga region had experienced meteorite impacts millions of years ago. So naturally, some began to wonder, could extraterrestrial beings have once visited Earth and accidentally left something behind? It sounds plausible, doesn't it? An object with such a mechanical appearance, dating back to a time long before humans even existed. But as you know, science doesn't stop at speculation. After years of careful research, experts arrived at a far less dramatic but highly convincing explanation. This screw is not alien technology, but the fossil of an ancient marine organism known as a crinoid, often called a sea lily. The name might sound unfamiliar, but these creatures belong to the class Crinoidea, relatives of starfish and sea urchins. What's fascinating is that their ancestors first appeared around 488 million years ago, long before many of the dinosaurs we know. Ancient crinoids had a very distinctive feature: long, slender bodies with spiral structures that closely resemble the threads of a screw. This is exactly why their fossils are so easily mistaken for artificial objects. When alive, they anchored themselves to the ocean floor, swaying gently with the currents. Strange yet mesmerizing creatures. Around 300 million years ago, during the Permian period, crinoids were incredibly widespread and thrived throughout the oceans. However, following the mass extinction event at the end of that period, most of them disappeared. Only a small number survived and continued to evolve into later eras. Today, their descendants still exist, although their appearance has changed significantly. Even more interesting, if you look closely, you can still find modern crinoids in places like Vietnam, especially in the Gulf of Tonkin. Unlike their ancient ancestors, however, most no longer have long, screw-like stems. Instead, they are typically free-moving or loosely attached to the seafloor. So, what was once called an alien screw turns out to be a piece of Earth's own history of life. But that doesn't make the story any less fascinating. In fact, it reminds us that nature is sometimes capable of creating things far stranger than human imagination. It just goes to show, without scientific explanation, many people might still believe this was evidence of extraterrestrial life. Graveyard of 75. Whales in the middle of a barren desert. What would you think if I told you that in a place so dry and cracked, it seems like nothing exists but sand and wind? There lies a sight so shocking it leaves anyone speechless. Not just a few scattered bones, but an entire massive graveyard where dozens of enormous creatures that once ruled the oceans now lie motionless in the middle of a desert. Hard to believe, right? At first, I didn't believe it either. But this is absolutely real. The discovery was made in June 2010 during the construction of a highway in the Atacama Desert in Chile, one of the driest places on Earth. What started as a few small signs beneath the surface quickly turned into something extraordinary. The deeper scientists dug, the more they realized they had stumbled upon something far from ordinary. Right before their eyes were numerous whale skeletons, and the number quickly rose to 75 individuals. Just imagine that for a moment, 75 whales, massive creatures of the ocean, lying together in a relatively small area in the middle of a desert, nearly 0.6 miles from the sea. How could something like that even happen? That question alone has left scientists puzzled. And it doesn't stop there. Among the dozens of skeletons discovered, around 20 benchimpachents were nearly completely intact, from head to tail, lying in various positions, as if they had been frozen in the very moment of their final breath. Because of this, the site is considered one of the best preserved prehistoric whale graveyards ever found. Scientists say that most of these fossils belong to baleen whales, with an average length of about 26 feet, roughly the size of a small bus. In addition, researchers also found remains of an extinct species of dolphin, previously discovered in Peru. This suggests that the area was once home to a wide variety of marine life around 2 million years ago. But the biggest question still remains. Why did nearly 100 massive marine animals die in the same place? A place that is now a dry, lifeless desert? Several theories have been proposed. One suggests that millions of years ago, this area was once a bay. The whales may have entered it to feed or live. Then, an earthquake could have isolated the bay from the ocean. As the water gradually dried up, the trapped animals had no way to escape, leading to a mass die-off. It sounds plausible, but it may not be the full story. Another theory proposes that a powerful storm or extreme tidal event washed the whales ashore. When the water receded, they were left stranded on land, unable to return to the ocean, and eventually died. But here's the problem. Neither theory fully explains all the details. For example, the skeletons are relatively concentrated in one area, and many are aligned in the same direction, as if they were affected by the same type of event, possibly repeated multiple times over a long period. This has led some scientists to believe that this wasn't a single mass death, but rather the result of multiple events occurring over time. So in the end, what really happened? Was this the result of ancient natural disasters, or a series of events we still don't fully understand? These questions remain unanswered, but one thing is certain. This whale graveyard in the Atacama Desert is more than just an archaeological discovery. It's like a massive puzzle left behind by nature, forcing us to rethink Earth's past, a past where oceans may have once covered places that today are nothing but sand and wind. And who knows, beneath that seemingly silent desert, there may still be other secrets waiting to be uncovered. What do you think? 5,000-year-old drum and the entwined bones of 3 children. What would you do if one day, in the quiet countryside of England, a secret buried for 5,000 years was suddenly uncovered? Not gold, not ancient weapons, not treasure of any kind, but a scene so powerful that even the most seasoned archaeologists were brought to tears. In Burton Agnes, East Yorkshire, a place that once seemed entirely unremarkable, scientists discovered an ancient grave containing a story both heartbreaking and deeply moving. 3 children buried together, their bodies tightly embracing one another, as if still searching for warmth against the cold weight of the earth after thousands of years. This discovery is not only a major breakthrough in archaeology, but also a profoundly human moment, one that left the entire world in silence. Inside the grave, the oldest child was holding the 2 younger ones, while the smaller children had their arms wrapped tightly around each other. That bond of love and protection, though buried for millennia, remains vividly visible to us today. It stands as a timeless testament to human connection, to the instinct to protect and care for one another, even in the face of death. The grave was discovered in 2015, and since then, it has been praised by the British Museum as one of the most significant archaeological discoveries related to prehistoric art in Britain in the past 150 years. But the importance of this find doesn't rest on the skeletons alone. Inside the grave were several extraordinary artifacts: a chalk ball, a carefully polished bone pin, and most notably, a carved stone drum with incredibly intricate designs. What's especially striking is that the drum was not placed randomly. It was positioned directly above the head of the oldest child, as if guarding their spirit, or perhaps serving as a sacred protective object. According to archaeologists, this drum was not actually a musical instrument. Instead, it appears to be a symbolic or spiritual sculpture, possibly representing protection, prayer, or hope. It may have been the final object placed in the grave, carrying with it everything the family could not express in words. Neil Wilkin, curator of the World of Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum, spoke emotionally about the discovery. He described it as one of the most unforgettable moments of his career. There's something protecting this grave. It's almost as if they're protecting the vulnerable child. It's a deeply moving scene. No one knows what happened to that family, but everything in that grave tells a powerful, emotional story. Indeed, while adults during that period were often cremated after death, these children were buried intact, a detail that suggests they may have been seen as especially in need of protection, even in death. And 5,000 years later, that same love, that pure, instinctive bond between three children, has endured across time, reaching and touching the hearts of people all over the world today. Ancient zombie. Grave reveals the fears of early humans. There's something quite fascinating. Our fear of the dead coming back to life didn't just appear in modern horror movies or stories. Thousands of years ago, people truly believed in it, and they even did everything they could to prevent it from happening. It may sound hard to believe, but a recent archaeological discovery in Germany has made this idea feel more real than ever. This past April, archaeologists from the State Museum of Prehistory of Saxony-Anhalt in the Oppen area announced a shocking find. They uncovered a grave dating back to the Neolithic period, a time when humans lived much closer to nature and held many mysterious beliefs about the afterlife. But what makes this grave remarkable isn't just its age, it's how the body was buried. As they dug deeper, archaeologists discovered a large stone placed directly on the legs of the deceased. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't caused by collapsing soil. It was clearly intentional. So why would ancient people do this? The explanation may sound unsettling, but within the context of that time, it makes a lot of sense. The stone may have been placed there to prevent the dead from rising again. In other words, they feared the deceased could return from the dead. Think about it. Living in a time when science didn't yet exist, death must have been both mysterious and terrifying. People didn't understand what happened after death, so they began to believe that the body might come back to life, or that the soul could return and re-enter the corpse. And so, preventative measures were created. According to Suzanne Friedrich, the excavation project manager, ancient people believed that the dead might sometimes try to escape from their graves. To stop this, they placed stones on the body, or even buried individuals face down to limit their ability to rise. Today, archaeologists refer to these types of burials with a chilling term: zombie graves. And this isn't an isolated case. A study published in 2020 in an archaeological journal documented another example: a man buried in a seated position with part of his body still exposed above the ground. Even hearing that sounds unusual, doesn't it? Scientists believe this burial method may also have been intended to control the body, just in case the dead tried to move again. According to archaeologist Rafael Garrido Pena from the Autonomous University of Madrid, Neolithic Europeans even believed that a person wasn't truly dead until the body had fully decomposed. Until that point, the corpse was still considered dangerous. As a result, some cultures would exhume bodies that hadn't fully decomposed and move them to a different, safer location. Returning to the grave in Germany, researchers also noticed signs that the body may have been exhumed and reburied, based on its unnatural position. This further supports the idea that ancient people were deeply afraid of the possibility of the dead returning. Of course, there are other possible explanations. It could have been a form of execution or part of a burial ritual with cultural meanings we still don't fully understand. However, for now, the fear of the living dead remains the most convincing explanation. This grave is believed to belong to the Bell Beaker culture, a civilization that spread across Europe between roughly 2800 and 1800 BC. They were named after their distinctive bell-shaped drinking vessels and were also known for their unique burial practices. So, does this give you chills? Long before zombie movies ever existed, humans already carried that same fear, and the ways they tried to deal with it are exactly what we're uncovering today. Now, if you were living in that time, what would you do to make sure the dead never came back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to see who comes up with the boldest idea. 50 skeletons buried beneath the Royal Abbey's drainage system. Did you know that in our vast world, there are places that appear solemn and historic on the surface, places people assume hold only glorious history, yet deep beneath them lie secrets that can send chills down your spine? Westminster Abbey in London, a site that has witnessed the coronations of countless kings, has recently revealed one such story. It all began when British authorities initiated an inspection and renovation of the drainage system beneath the Abbey. What seemed like a routine job involving pipes, mud, and infrastructure took a shocking turn. Beneath a toilet drain, workers discovered a wooden coffin, and when it was opened, what lay inside left everyone stunned. It was the skeleton of a child, only about 3 years old. What surprised archaeologists wasn't just the unusual burial location, but the skeleton itself. It didn't match the typical characteristics of monks who were usually buried there. In other words, this child didn't seem to belong among those who would normally be laid to rest in such a sacred place. But the story doesn't end there. As excavations continued, researchers uncovered something even more astonishing. As many as 50 additional human skeletons buried in the same area, all lying beneath the ground, directly under the drainage system still used by modern society today. Preliminary studies suggest that these remains were buried over 1,000 years ago, dating back to a highly turbulent period in English history. As for the 3-year-old child, the burial method suggests the child may have belonged to a family of some social status. However, due to the small size of the bones and their poor preservation, scientists have not yet been able to determine the child's gender. At this point, you're probably wondering, why would a child and dozens of others be buried beneath the drainage system of such a famous abbey? You're not alone. Scientists have been asking the same question. One theory suggests that these burials are connected to events around the year 1066, a time of major upheaval in England, including successive coronations following the death of a king. It's possible that during this chaotic period, some deaths went unrecorded, and these individuals were buried temporarily only to be forgotten forever. Warwick Rodwell, an archaeologist at Westminster Abbey, also acknowledged that the presence of the child remains a difficult mystery to explain. However, he believes this discovery may indicate that more remains, especially those of women and children, are still hidden and yet to be found. And that's not all. Near Poets' Corner, where many famous figures are buried, archaeologists also found skulls bearing puncture marks. Interestingly, these marks were not caused by war or ancient rituals, but by 13th century workers who accidentally struck older graves during construction. These skulls were then stacked together and left beneath the drainage system for hundreds of years. Hearing all of this, does it give you chills? A place visited by millions each year may be hiding an entire other world beneath it, where people from centuries ago still lie in silence, without names, without voices. For now, scientists continue to study these remains to determine their age, health, and origins. Traditionally, only kings, queens, and high-ranking clergy were buried inside the main church, so it's possible these individuals were clergy members or people closely connected to the abbey. Until then, all we can do is wait and see what new discoveries come to light. The tomb of a mysterious couple reveals same-sex love 5,000 years ago. There's a belief that many people still hold today, that homosexuality is simply a product of modern society, a trend that emerged as people became more open-minded. But if we rewind history and go back thousands of years, would that idea still hold true? The answer begins to emerge from a surprising archaeological discovery. In fact, the first clues appeared as early as 1964, when scientists uncovered an ancient tomb in Egypt. However, it wasn't until 2011, after more in-depth research by archaeologists from the Czech Republic, that the true story behind this tomb started to become clear. The tomb belonged to two men named Neolithic and Hotep, who lived around 2400 BC. What makes this discovery remarkable is that they were not buried separately, as was customary. Instead, they were buried together, in a manner typically reserved for married couples. At first, researchers were puzzled. They proposed a reasonable hypothesis. Perhaps the two men were twin brothers, and the site was temporarily referred to as the Tomb of the Brothers. That sounds logical, right? But the deeper they investigated, the more inconsistencies began to appear. The key lay in the carvings on the tomb walls. Rather than depicting a brotherly relationship, the images showed the two men in unusually intimate poses, gestures that, in ancient Egyptian art, were typically reserved for husband and wife. From the way they stood side by side, to the way they touched each other, to the expressions in their eyes, everything suggested a romantic bond rather than a familial one. And it doesn't stop there. Neolithic is known to have had a wife. Some images of her still appear in the tomb. However, in several carvings, her image seems to have been deliberately erased and replaced with that of Hotep. At this point, the story clearly becomes far more complex. Even their names were inscribed together with a meaning that suggests together in life and in death. It may seem like a small detail, but within the cultural context of that time, it carries significant weight. Scientists believe this may have been a closely guarded secret, possibly even connected to the royal court. During that period, not everyone had the privilege of building such elaborate tombs. Only individuals of high status or those with royal connections were granted burials of this kind. This implies that Neolithic and possibly Hotep were far from ordinary individuals. Interestingly, the concept of homosexuality as we understand it today didn't emerge until around the 1920s. Before that, such relationships were rarely documented clearly in history. Yet this discovery suggests that these kinds of bonds may have existed for a very long time. They were simply unnamed or kept hidden. From a scientific perspective, homosexuality, along with heterosexuality and bisexuality, is a natural variation of human sexual orientation. It is not something people simply choose, but rather the result of complex factors, including biological and environmental influences. More importantly, it is not a cause of psychological disorders, as was once mistakenly believed. So when we look back at the story of two men who lived over 4,000 years ago, we begin to realize that history is far more complex than it seems. Some truths have existed for a very long time. We just haven't fully understood them yet. The mysterious village, hidden beneath Lake Ohrid. If one day you stood by the edge of a clear, calm lake and looked down into the still water, would you ever imagine that right beneath your feet an entire ancient village might be lying there, silent for thousands of years? Not just a few scattered pieces of wood or broken pottery, but a whole community that once lived, breathed, and existed just like we do today? Probably not, right? But believe it or not, this almost cinematic story is real, and it's happening at Lake Ohrid, often called the Pearl of the Balkans. Beneath the lake's emerald waters, scientists have discovered the remains of an ancient village believed to date back around 8,000 years. Just hearing that number already feels incredibly distant, doesn't it? But what surprised researchers even more is that this may be one of the earliest settled communities in all of Europe. Using radiocarbon dating, archaeologists determined that the settlement dates back to roughly 6,000 to 5,800 BC. Albert Hafner, a professor of archaeology from the University of Bern, noted that this village could be several hundred years older than settlements once considered the oldest in the Mediterranean region or the Alps. Simply put, in terms of age, this place could be seen as a kind of ancestor of European villages. The site is located along the Albanian shore of the lake, near the border with North Macedonia. Over the course of 4 years, a team of researchers tirelessly dived beneath the surface, excavating and piecing together fragments of evidence. Gradually, a clearer picture of life there began to emerge. Between 200 and 500 people once lived in stilt houses built above the water or in areas that were frequently flooded. It might sound peaceful, like living close to nature, but imagine the reality. No machinery, no modern technology, yet building an entire village on water. That's no simple task. So why would they choose such a challenging way of life? The answer may lie in a discovery that surprised even the scientists. During one deep dive, archaeologists uncovered an incredibly dense defensive system. Thousands of sharpened wooden stakes were driven into the ground, forming a protective barrier around the settlement. Not just dozens or hundreds, but an estimated 100,000 stakes. Can you imagine that? To construct such a massive, spiked wall, ancient people may have had to cut down an entire forest. This suggests they weren't just trying to survive, they were actively defending themselves against a very serious threat. But the question is, what were they afraid of? So far, scientists don't have a definitive answer. It could have been human enemies, wild animals, or even some unknown danger we have yet to understand. And that's what makes this village a true mystery, not just an ordinary archaeological site. Thanks to Lake Ohrid, one of the oldest lakes in the world, estimated to be over 500,000 years old, the remains have been preserved remarkably well. Fossilized wood, especially oak, has allowed scientists to analyze tree rings and gain insight into the climate, environment, and survival strategies of the people who live there. Based on the evidence, researchers believe the inhabitants relied on farming and animal husbandry. They cultivated crops, harvested grains, hunted and raised animals. It may sound like a simple life, but it took place inside what was essentially a fortified settlement surrounded by water, protected by tens of thousands of sharpened stakes. So think about it, if there wasn't a real and constant danger, would they have gone to such extraordinary lengths? The world's oldest beer brewery. Have you ever imagined that over 5,000 years ago, in a legendary land along the Nile River, ancient Egypt was home to what may have been the largest beer production facility in the ancient world? Probably not. And you might not even believe it, right? But recently, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a brewery in the ancient city of Abbey, Egypt, a place that once served as a major center of power and religion for the legendary pharaohs. This discovery not only sheds light on the daily life of ancient Egyptians, but also completely reshapes how we understand their civilization. Dating back to the reign of Pharaoh Narmer, believed to be the first ruler to unify Egypt around 3100 BC, this brewery is now considered the oldest known beer production facility in the world. But what makes it truly remarkable isn't just its age. It's the essential role beer played in ancient Egyptian culture and religion. Beer was not simply a refreshing drink or a common part of daily meals. It was also a vital element in royal ceremonies and sacred rituals. That's why the brewery's location in Abydos was no coincidence. Abydos had long been known as a sacred center, where great pharaohs like Ramesses II and Seti I built magnificent temples alongside the Temple of Osiris, the god of the afterlife in ancient Egyptian belief. The presence of a brewery here reflects the deep connection between material life and spiritual practices in Egyptian society. What's even more impressive is the scale of this brewery. It consisted of 8 separate production units, each containing up to 40 large clay vats. These vats were used to ferment mixtures of grain and water, the key ingredients of ancient Egyptian beer. With such a large-scale system, the brewery could produce around 5,900 gallons of beer at a time, enough to supply not only ceremonial events, but also the daily needs of the local population. Interestingly, research suggests that workers in that era were given about 2.6 gallons of beer per day, a figure that highlights just how essential this beverage was to both their physical sustenance and mental well-being. From this discovery, we gain not only a deeper understanding of ancient Egyptian brewing techniques, but also a glimpse into the complexity and organization of early large-scale production systems. The brewery at Abydos stands as a powerful testament to the advanced development of an ancient civilization, one that knew how to combine practical knowledge with spiritual belief to create something truly enduring. Moreover, it serves as a reminder of the role beer has played throughout human history, not just as a recreational drink, but as an integral part of social, religious, and economic life. The discovery at Abydos opens a new window into the wonders of ancient Egyptian society, inspiring curiosity and a deeper appreciation for one of the greatest civilizations in human history. In many ways, every drop of beer produced 5,000 years ago carries with it a story of creativity, belief, and the rich, complex life of ancient Egypt, a story that continues to captivate and inspire the world to this day. The oldest cemetery in the world, discovered in Africa. Can you believe that deep beneath the ground in South Africa, inside a dark and treacherous cave system where sunlight has never reached, scientists have uncovered something that could completely change how we understand human evolution? A groundbreaking discovery, the oldest known graves in the world has been found in the cradle of humankind, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located about 25 miles from the city of Johannesburg. But what truly stunned the scientific community is not just the age of these graves, it's the identity of those buried beneath the rock and soil, an ancient human species with a brain size only about 1/3 of ours, Homo naledi. Homo naledi, a name that may sound unfamiliar but is rapidly gaining attention in the field of archaeology, was first discovered in 2015 by a research team led by American paleoanthropologist Lee Berger. This species was known for its climbing ability, small body size, and was once considered primitive, lacking abstract thinking or complex social behavior. However, this recent discovery has completely overturned those assumptions. At a depth of about 98 feet underground, researchers found human remains placed inside shallow pits, possibly dug intentionally. Surrounding these pits were stone walls engraved with abstract patterns, reminiscent of symbolic behavior previously associated only with modern humans and Neanderthals. If this interpretation is correct, and the evidence increasingly supports it, then Homo naledi may have practiced burial rituals between 335,000 and 241,000 years ago. What's truly astonishing is that, according to current scientific understanding, Homo sapiens, modern humans, did not begin intentional burial practices until at least 100,000 years later. This means that a species with a brain only 1/3 the size of ours may have possessed a deep awareness of life and death, enough to conduct funerals, bury their dead, and even create symbolic markings that resemble a primitive form of communication, something we once believed to be unique to modern humans. And it doesn't stop there. Scientists have also ruled out the possibility that these bones were deposited by water or moved by modern humans. Further investigations in 2017 revealed clear evidence that the shallow pits were deliberately dug, and the material used to fill them differed from the surrounding soil, indicating intentional burial rather than natural formation. The abstract engravings found nearby may represent one of the earliest forms of symbolic expression, possibly a precursor to writing or religious belief. This discovery challenges long-standing assumptions that burial practices, funerary rituals, and symbolic behavior were exclusive to Neanderthals or Homo sapiens. It forces us to rethink the entire story of human evolution, that perhaps the capacity for deep thought, emotional connection, mourning the dead, and leaving symbolic traces was not uniquely ours, but a shared evolutionary gift once held by our ancient relatives, Homo naledi. So how much do we truly know about our own past? That's a difficult question to answer, but perhaps one day we will finally uncover the full truth. You see, history is far from silent as we once thought. It's filled with strange stories, unanswered mysteries, and sometimes even discoveries that make science pause and rethink everything. The 12 discoveries we've just explored aren't just ordinary archaeological finds. They're reminders that the past still holds countless untold stories. What we know today may only be a small piece of a much larger puzzle. So let me ask you one last time, out of all these mysteries, which one do you find the hardest to believe? And do you think that somewhere out there, even more shocking discoveries are still waiting to be uncovered? Don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to give ancient history a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any other incredible discoveries. For now, goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video.